Welcome to Flair for Flows. My name is Aliona and you're watching a talk show where we discuss everything but relationships. You have heard of the honeymoon phase of a relationship. These initial months are called this because both partners have intense feelings of attraction and they tend to focus only on each other's positive characteristics. But what happens when the reality sets in and couple must navigate through new life challenges together? This is when the emotional intelligence skills related to relationship management become increasingly important. And I'm excited to introduce my today's guest experts. I have two brilliant minds today. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Well, good, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be
Pleasure
here.
having you. And Chiara, I will start with you. I know that you are an ICF certified professional executive coach. You are as well social, emotional intelligence coach, NLP master and trainer. So what's the secrets behind your happy marriage? Because I know that you're married more than 20 years, 3 kids, 5 countries where you lived in. So I believe it's a combination of the professional knowledge and personal experience that's brought you to the coaching.
Right, yeah, correct. I mean, there's a long story that I could tell about how I ended up being a coach, but I don't want to become boring, and obviously nobody really cares about the details of this. But in a nutshell, I think that probably like some personal struggles when it comes to, of course, relationship specifically here, and challenges that I was facing, as I was working, brought me to the world of coaching, because I myself experienced coaching as a client, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I want to try and be able to achieve the same results as a coach. And that's how I ended up, doing what I do for a living today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Omid, the majority know you as the general manager and director at Navitas, worldwide leading education company. Maybe a little bit less knew you as a media producer. That's correct. And I believe just very, very few are aware that you are as well a certified NLP coach and master. You practice in meditation and hypnotherapy. So how you combine these diverse topics and fields?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, real honor to be here, Chiara, with you, and knowing about the breadth of your expertise and experience, and look forward to a fascinating conversation today. And Aliona, that sort of pyramid of expertise is the small part of it, the NLP, etc., is hidden on purpose. And let me give a little bit of background as to why. When I learned about neuro-linguistic programming, I was so fascinated by it because for me it combined the two things that drove me to being fascinated all my life, and that was the the mental aspects of knowing and understanding, and the linguistic language. I love language, and when we think about those two, either in isolation or in combination, why does a speech stir us? Why did we call Obama or, well, the Kennedys, but indeed John Kennedy, a stirring speaker who could rally an audience towards a passionate goal, and why are others not?
Yeah.
Why does a piece of poetry move us, a film move us, a piece of text move us? Well, I think between the two facets, the neuro and the linguistic, is perhaps an expression of the spirit. Now, working in the arts, the media, and the business world, as you say, expertise in international education, when I got my qualifications in NLP, and a small correction, not coaching, practitioner, a colleague of mine who was doing the courses at the same time as me said, "Oh, I can't wait for you to practice." I mean, we would practice on each other, and she said, "I can't wait for you to do this in a sort of a practical setting." And I remember just saying, I don't intend to. I think this is a beautiful enough field where if I internalize it and apply it to my personal life and apply it to my professional life, that is being practitioner enough. So I'm a non-practicing NLP practitioner. But that's a not as brief as I want it to be, but a brief history of where I sit into this conversation, on this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank you. So let's jump in. And the first question I would like to start with is, of course, of the term and understanding what is social emotional intelligence, because nowadays some even claim that EQ is more important than IQ. Will you agree with that? And it's like, yes, let's start with the term and definition of the social emotional intelligence.
Right. So I would like to start with what you said, about the EQ and IQ, because I think it's very important. So first of all, IQ, is something that when you're born, like it's something you're given, Let's not go into how it's given and all of that, but let's say that it's a fixed number, So nowadays it's basically standardized in a number. And with that, there's not much you can do,
All right,
So
yeah.
your IQ will be your IQ forever, basically, right? EQ, on the contrary, is something that you can literally transform. So why is it nowadays so important? The short answer is in the fact that we all have had experiences with people who maybe had lots of university degrees, very little kindergarten experience. So, that kind of approach, that kind of relationship, the ability to interact with people in a way that works for both of, the parties is something that it's not available to everybody in terms of reality, but it's available to everybody in terms of learning,
I see.
So some people don't have it, but everybody can learn it. And I think that's very important. My definition of social emotional intelligence is basically the ability to understand ourselves and be able to manage what's going on with us internally and contemporarily also understand what's going on with the other person and be able to manage the relationship between, us and the other party involved.
I see.
So that's what social emotional intelligence, again, in a nutshell, is. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything would you like to add on it?
No, I think that's a great definition. I think it's really good. By the way, if you hate me at any point during this conversation, I promise by the end of it you'll like me again. So let me just inject a little bit, and I don't want to derail where you're going with this question because I think it's really important. I find so we know there's a lot of literature around academic and clinical literature around IQ. I get it. I've read a lot of it. I've read a lot of it in different sort of social and cultural settings, and it's one of the most outstanding measurable ways of determining success in certain factors of life. It can be a numerical predictor of things like industriousness, which translate into career success, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we know there's this whole other area that is broadly lumped into the EQ measure. So what I was going to say is I don't love the term EQ. I think it's a catch-all. I would love to go and get my EQ tested, but there's nowhere to do that. So I think it's a bit of a catch-all that measures certain things that we should be good at as productive members of society. But it's such a fluid thing. And I'll give you just a quick example before moving on. People who are able to meaningfully relate to others, to express socially desirable characteristics like empathy and sympathy and that sort of human connection are seen as being high EQ. Well, I think, just personal opinion, I think it's much more useful if we unpack that. Well, people talk about good leaders have EQ in the workplace. Really, what are they doing? Bring in cupcakes and hug their employees? I mean, is that it? No. I mean, I think it's so much more of a nuanced conversation. And I think that we would benefit from unpacking that to the aspects of empathy, sympathy, the ability to engage in a productive social setting. So yeah, EQ is a useful shorthand, which I think there is so much valuable information sitting behind it that requires a much more nuanced conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
And
that.
if I may just,
Please.
say something about what you just shared. I mean, thank you very much. Though I hope you won't mind me disagreeing to the fact that yes, it can be tested.
Okay.
It can be tested. That's one of the things that I actually do with people I work with. And when we talk about testing, we talk about an assessment. Obviously, the assessment is a self-assessment. So you are basically self-assessing. You are assessing yourself on specific abilities, competencies, how we call them. There are 26 competencies in social emotional intelligence with the kind of programs that I run in companies. It's specifically one of the most comprehensive. For example, Daniel Goleman, who made emotional intelligence very famous in '95, he has his own assessment which only has 25 competencies. So, like give or take, we're around that number of competencies. And sympathy is not one of those.
It's not? Wow.
Oh,
Okay.
how interesting. Yeah.
It's not one of those. And I mean, again, we could bring the conversation to a very vast place here. But I would make a comment about the sympathy not being there for one reason, because it requires a bit of judgment.
Okay.
So when you talk about social emotional intelligence, there is no place for judgment, so or at least it has to be somehow managed. But sympathy to me is always one of those words that causes a bit of but potentially with sympathy you wanted to say more competencies in one word, I'm guessing. And again, to dive a bit deeper into this, one of the most important competencies in social emotional intelligence is personal power. Because obviously if you lack that, there is no way you will be able to be a socially emotionally intelligent human being.
Oh, okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please.
I would beyond today love to undergo this assessment. I would love to live it. So please,
Absolutely.
if
We
you,
can totally
So,
have a chat
yeah,
about
after
that.
the conversation,
Yeah.
absolutely, we can do that.
Great.
And yes, I like the way it's going, the conversation, so please, you don't need to agree on each and
Right,
every
right.
point. That's why I try to, when we talk about the relationship, it's always female and male. We cannot just judge from one side. That's why I wanted that we covered it fully from all the 360 degrees. So please feel free to share all your opinion about that. And I think the beauty also about the social emotional intelligence, compare, for example, with narcissism, like we discussed last week, that is something that you have it, you can't unlearn it. So with social emotional intelligence, that's the skill set that you can gain.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So talking about that, what are the key components of the emotional intelligence and how we can bring it to ourselves and to maintain the healthy relationship?
So, as said, I just shared about personal power, and personal power is very important for the reasons that I explained before. I mean, if you have that sense of personal power. So you look at yourself in the mirror and you see the lion that's inside of you, because we all have that element of power. Obviously, the level of strength that you acquire to work on everything else, it's much different. Another component, key component of social emotional intelligence, in my opinion, is the ability to, self-assess. So being able to ask yourself, what is it that I'm dealing with right now? How do I feel about this specific thing?
So, sorry to interrupt. So many people, they're not able to self-assess.
Look,
Like,
I mean,
they don't understand which emotions they are going through. I know it can be challenging about the other person, but about ourselves, is that so hard?
if I asked you, how do you feel right now?
Excited, a little bit nervous, happy, positive.
Good job.
Yeah.
You're like, not many people can answer this question so quickly.
Oh, really?
Actually, probably it's the first time I'm hearing somebody being so yeah, like.
That's why maybe I have this question,
There
you know.
you go,
Yeah.
exactly. So the ability to be aware of your own emotion, in your case, is fantastic, right?
Okay.
There's so many people who don't know how to do that. But think of it also from an education perspective, right? So our parents, I mean, I'm 44, so, I don't consider myself neither young nor old, right? So I'm an adult.
Just gorgeous, always gorgeous, yeah.
So I don't remember my mom ever asking me like, how do you feel? Ever.
I see.
She never asked me, how do you feel? Nowadays, I see that with my kids, I'm doing it like on and on, right? Oh, how does that make you feel? How do you feel about that? And okay, how do you feel today? You
And
know,
try
so-
to describe your emotions. Yes,
Right.
I've seen that as
And
well.
the
Yeah.
question, of course, prompts the child, the person, to stop and, you know, like ask yourself. You have to ask yourself the question. Okay, to answer mom, I need to ask myself, right? And a lot of kids will go like, fine. My son is one of those actually. So, you know, like it's this emotional intelligence, the ability to actually put a name on a feeling that you are experiencing. It's not so common, you know,
Okay,
and
I
I've been
see.
seeing it, you know, a lot. So I understand why you're surprised.
Yeah.
Because for you it was like, boom, you were able to answer the question like super quickly, you know, but
And that's actually the problem for many, right?
right, right.
Can I bring up something here?
Yeah, absolutely.
A really good friend of mine has a teenage son, and I'd love to use this as a springboard into further conversations about human relations and the social emotional sort of aspect of it. So we had a conversation a while ago, and they were going through a tough time as a family, and we've all been teenagers here,
Yeah.
and I've been a teenage son, and I certainly know how it expressed a lot of things. She would say that at points the emotion of the conversations would get so raw that the way they could carry on the conversation, which for her was a reasonable compromise, was for them to physically separate. He'd go to his room or another room, and they'd continue through text. I just went, whoa, that's certainly didn't happen in my generation.
No.
So is there an evolution, Chiara, in your opinion, of how we relate and how we express and how we interact? And I agree, that was sort of very spontaneous self-assessment, but are people distancing from the raw emotions, or are they still able to engage with them just in different ways?
I don't know, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. Obviously there are different tools that are available nowadays compared to what we had, as you said. And look, at the end of the day, I think that the most important thing is the workability of something, right? So if for this family specifically, it works to achieve the result of expressing the emotion and then managing what's there to be managed, and it has to happen through, you know, text messaging, fine. I mean, who is, you know, there to judge if it's right or wrong? You know, like if it works, it works. I mean, it doesn't, maybe it won't work for me, it won't work for you, but it works for them. Good, go ahead. I mean, don't change, don't fix what's not broken. So in that case, you know, yes, things are changing, and some people are distancing themselves, but there's also an amount of communication that's happening that wasn't there when I was a teenager. I mean, I wasn't communicating that much with my friends. So arguably, I really don't know how to answer this question. So there's more interaction. The quality of the interaction is questionable. But again, we had less interactions. But how were the interactions? I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Omid, you mentioned about the phone. It's actually a very good point, because nowadays we are the new technologies, and we are also communicating primarily online. Like, is it also affecting on the level of, and it's our skills of emotional intelligence, and is it damaging our relationship or helping? Like, what's the impact it has?
Again, I think it's a difficult question to answer. We would need to have more data, more time that has passed. You know,
In your personal opinion?
Yes and no, for the same reason. I mean, there's more interaction. It removes those barriers that we had as, you know, when we didn't have access to technology. So of course, if you wanted to start a conversation with somebody, you would have to go somewhere. Nowadays, you can start the conversation from pretty much anywhere. You know, from the comfort of your couch, you know, wearing slippers and your PJ. So I think that every tool, like, you know, like a piece of paper can be useful to write something, but can also, you know, cut your skin. So it always depends on how you use the tools that are available. So progress is never, you know, regression. So it's about workability. How do you make the things that you have work for you or against you?
I see.
I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
I
really
see that
interesting.
Omid is thinking something.
I'm thinking,
yeah.
I really like this workability. It's how you make it. So I would say the amount of opportunities to connect and converse, in my personal opinion, do not serve humanity, do not serve us. And I'll mention why. It's predicated on one sort of idea. One of my favorite living philosophers, Slavoj Žižek, has, and I'm paraphrasing, so please don't put in the comments that I've misquoted the guy. He says that essentially one of the things that the current generation is suffering from not experiencing is having sucked the falling out of falling in love. Now, I really like that because we know that love, and not just as that positive thing that drives humanity, but as a general expression of rawness of emotion and connection, has a flip side of the coin, and we get bruised and we get hurt and we cry, and it makes it so much sweeter. It's the yin and yang, it's the night and the day. It's the rawness and the vulnerability naturally opens us up to a breadth of emotion, not just one. One of my very good friends, and he'll forgive me for sharing the story, I hope. And if he doesn't, who cares, right?
Yeah.
He gave me this amazing thing. He said that he went on a date with someone who they connected on Instagram or met on Instagram or through friends on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram, so I wouldn't know. And he said it was really interesting. And I sort of asked my probing questions for him to unpack the date. It was 2 days later. And he said, well, you know, the first thing, obviously we got there and she looked nothing like she did in Instagram. And I went, oh, so that's sort of, for me, that's like fraudulent, right? And he goes, no. Because I look nothing like I look on my Instagram, you know, with all his fake muscles and whatever. So I said, hold on a second. So we've started from a point of entire fallacy. Your memes of each other in the virtual world, and you just happen to meet. And then his next criticism, and I'm sure she had valid criticisms of him, because obviously the date went very poorly, was the whole
There was
time-
no second date, right?
There was no, as far as I know, I should hope there was no second date. But apparently she ordered food that would be Instagrammable photos, and they chose a location. And I'm like, hold on a second. So you're basically so we don't need to believe Elon Musk that we're in a simulation. You are in a simulation. Where is the actuality of bumping into someone and that moment of the fluttering butterflies of the smile? And okay, we can say it's gone. We can say it's fine that it's gone. But I just sense that we're missing a little something here. And I see it everywhere. I see it in corporate settings, I see it in family life, I see it, and I feel that we're hungry for a little bit of a romantic renaissance to sort of recapture a lot of those pent-up emotions. Now, Jonathan Haidt and colleagues have done a lot of research out of Harvard about correlation between things like as specific as the advent of Facebook's like button and the spike in things like depression and anxiety, particularly in young girls, but in the general population. Now, you know, we've transferred social proof into the digital realm without really having worked out how to make it that useful tool of ours yet. And I say, I'm not criticizing anyone as a society, so I'm just a little bit afraid that as things like, you know, the validity of emotions and how they work in our life becomes more and more important in this increasingly mad world, we haven't mastered the tools. And I think there are antidotes to it. I think, you know, the renaissance of the romantic ideals, I think, is perhaps one of them. But anyway, I'm not the expert. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, look, I mean, very valid points there. though I'm thinking of what probably our parents or grandparents were thinking of us when we were growing up. Probably, you know,
Something very different, yes.
along the lines of, oh, this generation,
We've been different,
right,
yes,
this
better,
is not what we've been doing, this is so wrong. Of course now, I mean, what happened in the past few years has been an evolution that hasn't happened before at such speed. So obviously the difference is more evident nowadays. But we also have to keep in mind that these kids were born with those tools, you know. So we are in a bridge kind of situation where we were born without the tools, then, you know, the tools came by and we started using them, asking our kids for, oh, how do you do this, how you do that, you know. My mom asking me, my mom is still like trying to figure out how to use some of the stuff, but she's posting, it's a way to really connect. The quality of the connection, again, it's very, it can vary from very poor to amazing. You know, people have met through social media, have married, and you know, happy, you know, living happily ever after, something like this. But I don't know. I really want to try to avoid to have a dogmatic answer to these kind of things, because I am not 16, 18, 20. And I have not lived a life with a specific set of tools that gives me access to a world that I have been given access to only when I was, 20-something, you know. So it's very different, I think. But again, it all boils down to another one of the competencies, which is absolutely crucial, and to me, the secret recipe to every successful relationship, which is communication.
Yes.
I mean, the way you communicate is what matters. I mean, if you communicate through Instagram or phone or in person, obviously there will be different shades to the quality of the conversation, but it's just a shade, it's the spice. But the, you know, like the core is the communication itself, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that's the game changer in every kind of relationship, be it like a work relationship, you know, mother-son, father and daughter, you know, husband and wife. Whatever kind of relationship happens through communication. If communication doesn't work, there's no relationship. To me, that's it. That's how I managed to be with the same guy for 26 years.
And do you, like, in terms of work, clients, personal, clinical, corporate, do you have, you know, particular sets of strategies for working with people to sort of increase their ability in that particular competency, in injecting sort of better quality communication in the mix?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different things that you can, help the clients with when it comes to communication. Obviously, the first thing that I do is assess where the actual problem is, because again, we're going back to the personal power.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no personal power, my communication will come out as, you know, a bit weak. You know, I will not be assertive. I will struggle to voice my thoughts. You know, I will be feeling like the victim in the communication, right? When personal power is there, the place where I start from with my communication is completely different, right? So that's number one.
Yes.
So that's why it's a non-negotiable competency, personal power, and we can start from there, right? When it comes to communication specifically and tools, there's a guy called Rosenberg who made like a mega business out of one specific tool, which is called the nonviolent communication. I don't know if you ever heard about this. This is also addressed in NLP. It's how you communicate, you know, the things that you want to communicate. So, for example, just to give also the audience a bit of a practical
Absolutely,
tool, right?
yes, we love practical tools, yes.
So, an example could be I'm sitting at home and my husband walks in and he starts sharing about stuff that didn't work in his day, and he's very angry, frustrated, anxious, whatever, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm busy and, you know, like there's something happening right here, right?
Yeah.
And I want him to know, right? So I may say like, oh, you making me nervous, or you interrupting me, you know, which at the end of the day, it's what's happening, right?
Sure.
But how do you think my message is going to land on my husband? Probably not in the best way. He's already like, you know, like very anxious and stressed and all of that. He's gonna go like, oh, and then
More stress, yeah.
I will go like, and you know, not say what the words could be that could cross his mind in that specific moment. But obviously, it's not going to be the nicest kind of thoughts, you know. So, what if in the same situation I took a second to really assess how I feel, right? Okay, he is coming home, he is sharing all this stuff. How do I feel? I'm working, how do I feel? I feel annoyed maybe, I feel worried. You know, there's so many different emotions. I just have to go and look for that specific deep one. And then the I message is when, and then I state the fact. When you come home and interrupt me as I'm working, I feel annoyed. You know, how do you think this will land on my husband if I did that instead of like, oh, you're interrupting me, you're so annoying?
No, absolutely. That will give him understanding, like what's behind your emotions. So, and also it will, in a way, like how he will act accordingly. So it will change his action.
Right,
Basically,
and there's less feeling of being attacked.
Absolutely,
you know, like,
yeah.
I don't feel under attack if I'm told like, you know, when somebody comes home and interrupts me as I'm working by saying what's happening, I feel annoyed, and the consequence is I may not want to have a conversation with you. So I am bringing what's happening here in the center on the table rather than just throwing it at him, right? So there's less of a threat happening there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So why is it called nonviolent communication? Because I'm not throwing my emotions, my feelings, my internal state at him, but rather sharing it and offering as a, look, this is what's happening, you know, this is what, clearly something is happening with you, and this is what's happening with me when this happens, and the consequence is I may not want to have a conversation with you. And, you know, the reaction is either, okay, whatever, don't care, moves on, or, oh, wait a second. So there's a sort of a self-assessment that happens on the other side. Oh, I didn't realize that that's what I'm causing when I'm, you know, walking into a room and doing that. So it's a partnership, you know, because the communication is open. I feel safe to share what I'm dealing with. You know, there's trust, there's open communication, and obviously there will be arguments, there will be disagreements. It's okay, you know, it's okay to disagree. It's absolutely fine. But how you disagree, how you communicate, it what makes
it's more important.
Yes.
Totally agree. Anything that's
So, great. So working with people, and one thing I got from that was, you would, in that scenario, you would express your frustration at the action or the behavior rather than the person. So it's easier to not take it personally.
Exactly.
I don't suck,
Otherwise
my behavior sucks. You know?
Yes, exactly. Because everything we tend, the human beings, we take it personally immediately. Yes.
Yeah.
So if communication, and I can see how you would sort of, you know, give people those tools. What you mentioned 25 or 26 different ones. I'm so curious about a couple more that you think is just as important as communication. Or at least, you know, one more, because it's a fascinating list to visualize.
Right. I mean, it's a long list divided into the different quadrants. It becomes, you know, it's about awareness. So I'm going to talk about the 4 quadrants. So maybe it's easier rather than the individual competencies. So there's the first. So the competencies are divided into 4 spaces, right? So there's self-awareness and self-management. Then the awareness of others and the management of others, which is the social interaction, you know. So the first set of competencies are about understanding, you know, ourselves. The second set is about managing ourselves and what's happening with us. The third set is understanding others, and the fourth set, managing the relationship with others. So when you have all of them, you know, and you're working on them constantly, it's bingo, right?
Yes. But how long it takes, let's say, from the beginning, from the self-assessments and dealing others and helping it for the relationship. Is it like a time frame or it's individual as well?
Look, it depends on what the goal is. Some companies will, if we talk corporate, some companies, will hire me to work on a specific set of competencies given by the assessments. So I will make sure that all the participants in the workshop will, undergo the assessment so that I get a sense of what are the strong ones and what are the ones that could do with a bit of work. So we focus on that. So it's very targeted. When it comes to individuals and who want to embark on a very deep and comprehensive journey, then we go through all of them. To go through all of them, if I'm working with an individual, that's probably around 6 months.
Okay.
With weekly meetings and conversation, and then once you have that conversation, you go out, you try the things and the tools that we talked about in the real world, because obviously the real world is not in session. Right? so that's how I generally work with
that's very fascinating, truly, and I couldn't agree more about the communication points, and I think that's something that's within generations. It's still the same points, because even from my mom, she's always keeps saying that you should be with the partner in life with whom you can communicate. This is the key. So it doesn't matter about the generations, that's always stay there.
Absolutely. And that's probably the thing that we have in common with previous and future
Yes, absolutely. So and unfortunately, we are running out of time. It's been so fascinating discussion, and there is another segment of the questions that I would love to discuss, but unfortunately, as we don't have the time to do that, so we have to come to the closure part. And I would love, I think, to hear one advice from each of you about the happy relationship. What's the key ingredient beside the social emotional intelligence, as we discussed? But what can be the other key ingredients for that?
Okay,
with the gentleman,
Thank you. So I think we talked a little bit about the tools available, about the interpretation, about so much that's out there. In my social circles, professional work, etc., come across a lot of individuals who may be stuck in patterns that are not serving them. And I often try to give the advice that I can to, where appropriate, seek out a coach, where appropriate, speak to someone who through therapeutic methods can sort of unlock certain potentials. And people tend to freeze up and hesitate. So I would love to say, we're on this fascinating, crazy journey called life. There are more tools, methods, means, and experts available than ever before. Too many people, individually, suffer in silence, where I think we finally have the ability to move far beyond that and to correct a lot of that individual suffering. So as one piece of advice, I would say seek out great people with great tools and great ideas, because once you do unlock those potentials and sort of work through those knots in your emotional muscles, life just gets so much sweeter.
So true. And we love sweets.
Indeed.
Chiara, any closing notes from you?
I mean, to add to this, I think it's beautiful and very valid. I think that my personal suggestion would be to consider a relationship. Obviously, we're talking about partnership, partners. Consider a relationship as a partnership, as a place where to strive for transformation on a daily basis. Getting married, it's not the end goal. It's just the beginning. It has to be worked on a daily basis by putting each other's into the space of what can I do better today. There's no guilt, there's no judgment, none of that, no morale, nothing like that. This is absolutely useless and doesn't help at all. I think it's very important to look at what can I do better next time, looking at the mistakes done in the past, and always strive for, evolution, transformation, you know, making it better in partnership. And you can even ask the question like, how can I be a better wife? I mean, sometimes I do ask that question to my husband.
And
I think that
what's the answer?
the
Always
answer
different?
they're always different, obviously depends on the time, but and when he asked me that question, it's almost like the feeling that you get when you hear this question is incredible, because you feel like, wow, we're actually designing our relationship together, and this is something that's pretty valuable and precious to me.
Yeah,
So
sure. Thank you. Beautifully said. Such a great advice. Yes,
I love that, and I think it's so great to keep in mind that, like, it's a bit of a cliche, but every day is a new day, right?
Yeah.
Every morning we wake up, it's life's little reset button. So it's so nice, as you said, relationship by design. We get to design it. We get to delve into it, find out what makes us happy, our partner happy, and sort of grow something together. So I think that's really cool.
And I would like to add that we do argue, and a lot, and it can get really ugly, you know, but it's because we do that we do it in a way that's, again, workable for us. That,
Okay.
you know, every barrier that we face together, it creates something, you know, creates an obstacle that then once we worked on that obstacle, then, you know, our relationship becomes better. So,
Yeah, so it's,
I mean, avoiding confrontation and avoiding the obstacle is not advisable, in my opinion, but again. you know.
yes. But then, like, each couple, they find
Yeah.
their own formula
Absolutely.
how to, yes, overcome any of the issues in the relationships. But thank you. It's been, Omid, Chiara, such a delightful conversation. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next Thursday.